else want to join us. And of course, then I will start slowly with the introduction for this webinar today. So 1 minute more. Thank you. Okay, I will slowly start with the webinar and with the introduction. So as I hope that you already know, but if not, this webinar is organized on behalf of the organization, the Association of Balkan Eco Innovation. And on behalf of the organization, today I'm going to present you this the webinar, the slides, the presentation prepared. And my name is Maja Budimir, and I'm the experienced project manager for many years. And in one moment, my colleague Davide Guariento will join also to explain you more deeply some parts of the budget calculation. And this webinar is, the topic for this webinar is actually chosen as we are, of course, through our experience, we actually realized that the problems related to the budgeting and the budget calculation are huge, and there are always some uncertainties and always some questions. Is budget reliable? Is it solid, or things like that? So that was the main reason behind. Sorry for this. And also one more thing to say here is that we also actually realize that through your needs and specific requirements, that also anybody else would like to hear more about the Horizon Europe budgeting. So let's start slowly with this in order to have a good structure for the webinar today. We actually split it, the content into the two parts. The first part is dedicated to the proposal stage. It's actually the preparation of the budget. It's actually the estimation of the future budget. And second part is related to the project stage. And it's actually the implementation of the budget, actual costs and spending of it. So budget planning is, I will have to say that budget planning is important here, not only for the project and proposal per se, it is important also for you. And it will give you the detailed information about the resources you need and their balanced actually distribution throughout the implementation. Also, shortly at the end of this presentation, I will just use a few slides to show you the organization activities and our work. So let's go slowly. Horizon Europe proposal stage, budget estimation. So as I mentioned, it's within the proposal stage, the budget is only the estimation of your future expenses, and actually it's representing the breakdown of costs that should demonstrate the required resources for the proposed project. What does it mean? It means that the budget must correlate with the expected efforts and tasks detailed in the work packages and should reflect the quality of the overall work plan. So in other words, the proposed budget must give an accurate assessment of all cost items and cost amounts that are deemed necessary and reasonable for for your work. But before starting the budgeting process, the most important thing is actually for you to have a solid project work plan developed that can serve as a foundation for the budget calculation. One more thing before we start with the real calculation is also we need to introduce ourselves with some funding rules. First rule is actually that the budget requirements change based on the program and type of calls. And for example, some calls may provide you with 100% of funding to all the partners, for example, Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Action, or some other can cover only 70% of the proposed budget for non-public organizations, such as, for example, SMEs, and within the Horizon Europe Innovation Action, for example. So this thing is this is good to remember, but I will mention it again at the end of our calculation. Second rule is actually the eligibility criteria of costs. So today we are going to present you more of eligible costs. But just to mention, of course, European Commission recognized some costs as ineligible. So you may find the list of all ineligible costs on the website of European Commission Funding and Tenders. You just type the ineligible costs within the search section. So you will find the whole list, but just to mention here, just to have a clear picture of what kind of costs are ineligible. Those are the costs of currency exchange losses, for example, bank charges for transfers from the EU Commission, deductible, VAT, etc. Third rule, let's say, it's actually cost categories. It's actually the breakdown of defined cost categories, which can be found also within the budget table, within the Part A template for the proposal. This budget table represents only the overview of costs, but all costs categories are presented here. And we will start each by each with the explanation of each category. So the first category are the direct costs, which are very important, of course, especially because the first type of the direct costs is our personnel costs. And within this table, they are marked with the A letter. And I will tell you more about the personnel costs after, but in shortly, it's representing these costs are representing the employees working on your project. Second type is other direct costs, and here we can see that travel costs, equipment, and other goods and services you need to implement through your tasks are covered here. Third type is our subcontracting costs, marked with the C letter, and those costs are directly related to project tasks that are going to be implemented by non-project partners. Fourth type is representing the special budget category, marked with the D letter, and here are for example, direct costs of providing financial support to third parties. To be more descriptive, here are the costs, for example, within the cascade funding projects for the open calls, etc., or procurement costs as well. So let's go to the first category, which the most important one. It's within the direct costs. It's a personnel costs, and this category is actually one of the most important, as I said, and also the calculation of it is very important. And because it's representing the highest budget share in the majority of EU-funded projects, and especially when there is not a physical product development, for example, software, some kind of software project development, and it can go up to the 60 or 70% of the total proposed budget. The formula for the calculation of this let's say, estimated personnel costs is actually person month rate of the organization times estimated person months. So let's go into more deeply into the definition of it. So first of all, person months are representing the human effort, actually the metric for the time that the key personnel of an organization devotes to a specific project. Example, to be more descriptive, example is, for example, 1 person month is equal to 1 month full-time effort of a participant in the project, or, for example, 2 participants working half-time. So next, so we have a person month rate calculation. So Davide, my colleague Davide Guariento, will join me here to present you more deeply this calculation.
Hello, everybody. Yes, as Maya has already mentioned, this can be done in mainly 3 different ways. Here we are presenting you the most common and simplest way to calculate a person month rate. So the first step is actually to calculate the hourly rate of specific personnel. This is equal to the actual annual personnel costs. This comprehends the gross salary plus social expenses, pension, and taxes to a certain degree. And this number should be divided by 1,720 hours. 1,720 hours is the standard number of hours taken by the European Commission as working hours in 1 year. This is equal to 215 days for 8 hours per day. And again, 215 is the average amount of working day in 1 year for the European Commission. As I was saying, this is the simplest way to calculate it. You can use these numbers. On the other hand, if your organization, company has a different accountancy, let's say a standard procedure, you can use also your procedure. But this, as I was saying, simply the easiest way. The second step, once you have calculated the hourly rate, is to calculate the average person month rate for that personnel. How you can do this? It's the hourly rate times 1,720 divided by 12. So this would be considered as an average month of work. Here we can see an example. A numeric example of what I was saying. We calculate firstly the hourly rate. We took as an example personnel that has 12,000 euros as an actual annual personnel cost. Divided by 1,720 hours, then the hourly rate of that person, it would be 6.98 euro per hour. Then the second step would be to multiply this by 1,720 divided by 12, and this would be 1,000 euros person month rate average for that person. Very important, you may come up with the idea of directly taking the gross salary of that person for the project. But the problem is that in many countries, not often in Serbia, there is the possibility of having a 13th and 14th month salary. And the 13th and 14th month salary fit in the actual annual personnel cost. Hence, if you divide, if you only take the monthly gross salary of one personnel, you would make a mistake because you're not considering the percentage of the 13th and 14th month on that personal month value. So please be careful to do all calculations and to follow step by step to make sure not to make a mistake. Then we have calculated the person month rate of one person, but in the project most likely we have a team of persons, and you need to provide the project coordinator with an average person month rate for your organization. An easy way to calculate, or better to estimate, a realistic person month rate for your organization is to see who you expect to participate in the project and to assign to each of them a contribution to the project. You can do this in a percentage base. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Of course, always related to the work plan and to the Gantt, as Maya showed you. Here, just a simple example, we have chosen a team of 3 people, where the first one has a PM rate of 1,200 euros, a contribution of 20% of the assigned hours to your organization. The second one, 1,000 euros with a contribution of 60%. And the third person, a PM rate of 1,600 with a contribution of 20%. You can see under here the calculation. It's very simple. You just multiply the person month rate for the contribution of that person and sum all of them. And at the end, you will get the average person month rate for the organization, that it's 1,160 euros. Please consider that this is the number that you should give to the coordinator when they are calculating the budget. So you should say the person month of my company or of my organization is this one. There is another possibility, is that your organization, especially if you're a university, already has a person month rate for the university, let's say, or a range for the person month rate. So you may only have to ask to the office that is taking care of this. If not, and if you have never participated in a project, then this is the way how you can calculate in a simple way. We can go to the next slide. So the estimation of number of person months, as Maya was saying, the best way to do it is to estimate the number of person months, so the effort, following the Gantt diagram that is prepared for the proposal. There you can add a column to assign for each task your personnel effort in hours, and assign for each task the hours of your personnel. Then you can, of course, define the roles of your personnel for each task and connect them to the relevant work packages. Doing these two things, you will have a good understanding of how many hours you will work per task and who will be doing that in your organization. Now, we have taken an example of having 30 person months assigned to your organization for all the tasks of the project. Let's remember these 30 person months are shared among several team members. So to do the final calculation, to calculate the personnel cost of your organization, that was the goal of all these slides, you should multiply the person month rate of your organization, in our example 1,160 euros, times the estimated person months assigned to your organization, which is 30, for a total of 34,800 euros.
Okay, thank you, Davide.
You're welcome.
So keep in mind some few things, for example, when calculating the personnel costs. The first thing is actually the perspective. It can be different, of course, if you're a coordinator or if you are just a partner that participates within the proposal. So as a coordinator, of course, the budget development is a process that is parallel to work plan development, but we also mentioned that it's suggested also to actually to track your plan development. the work plan development. But if you are a partner, you already have your internal procedure. For example, this way we present it to you, it's a good one. And also as a partner, you may expect that a coordinator will probably ask you to please send me the budget now, like, so be prepared for it. Also, one more thing, please have a clear understanding of what a person month is and how you can calculate it, calculate it for this calculation of the cost in general. And be aware that the different funding rate that we mentioned at the beginning of the story within the funding rules, so that depending on the type of action, so just always check the funding rate. So let's go next with other direct costs. First one are travel costs. Horizon Europe actually recognized this, of course, travel costs, and they're including the costs of arrival and departure, round trip in general, accommodation costs, of course, hotel and etc., per diems, and all taxes and charges related to it, non-coverable VAT, visitors tax, etc. Two things are here important. For example, if you are a single partner project, within the single partner projects, these trips are usually for dissemination purposes, so fairs, exhibitions, conference fee, etc. But when it comes to collaborative projects, you may always count at least on 2 to 4 consortium meetings per year. So keep that in mind when it comes to the calculation of costs. You will see later on. Depending, of course, these costs are vary, depending on the nature of each project. For example, some agricultural projects, and we may have the trips for field tests, for example, or clinical researches or something like that. Also be careful here, because high travel costs, of course, are not that favored by the evaluators. And we all experienced like this situation during the COVID-19 pandemic when all meetings or even consortium meetings were performed as online meetings. So all of this, I mean, the logic, you need to follow the logical situation of the project. So this is it. The second kind of direct costs, other direct costs, are actually the costs of equipment and goods and services. Here, the cost of equipment are mostly seeable, I mean, within the industrial projects. Those are the costs of development, testing, and building of products. Of course, EU grant justifies this expense only for the duration of the project, and you should keep that in mind when during the calculation of the costs during the project period, and when you need to also to calculate the amortization of the equipment here. Second one is, of course, goods and services, and those are the costs are related to the raw materials, scientific publications, translation services, dissemination activities, IPR, data storage, sensitive data storage and servers, etc. Here also, for example, when it comes to the data storage, this kind of costs could be claimed also under the other, for example, for outsourcing or under the third-party costs against payment, but only depending on the project context and storage availabilities. So that's the important thing. Next type of other direct costs sorry, are subcontracting costs, and they could be very important, of course. Sometimes this kind of costs are actually directly related to the project tasks that are going to be implemented by non-project partners, subcontractors. Just keep in mind here also that the costs for other goods and services are also contracts, for example, but the main difference here is that they are not related to the action tasks. To be more descriptive, again, example, we have a project partner, the company A, and needs to collect data from different countries in order to decide on the best place to install a pilot. A company specialized in electronic data collection is contracted for that task. So you may see, for example, that the main activity was actually installation of the pilot, but also supporting the very important activity was data collection, and that's how it's. And for that job, this another company is contracted. Some things that you need to keep in mind when it comes to subcontracting costs, because these costs could be very could be differently interpreted by evaluators. So keep in mind that, for example, first of all, the applicant is solely responsible for carrying out the input a subcontractor will bring into the project. Secondly, that subcontracting may not cover core tasks because evaluators, of course, they don't favor this high level of dependency to an external entity. So always think twice when it comes to the subcontracting. Thirdly, there is no limit to subcontracting costs in Horizon Europe. However, generally, it's recommended to keep these costs below 15% of the total project costs. Finally, costs of subcontracting are not taken into consideration when calculating the 25% of indirect costs. You will hear this once again when we come to the indirect costs. But also one more tip for you is that subcontract has been agreed and within the budget calculation period, and it's allocated in the grant agreement. So please avoid the risk of the ex post recognition of costs by the EU Commission, because sometimes it could be very complicated or rejected. Next, so second cost category, we are coming to indirect costs, or you may find somewhere it's overheads. Indirect costs, here within this table, budget proposal table, they are marked with an F letter, and they are correlated, of course, to the eligible direct costs. The percentage of these costs within the Horizon Europe is fixed, of course. It can vary, but depending on the program. But it can reach, usually it can reach up to 25% of the aforementioned direct costs. You could not request, as I already said this, but you could not request the indirect costs for subcontracting. And finally, these costs are reimbursed at flat rate in Horizon Europe. They are very popular because no documentary evidence is necessary, so no justification at all. And partners usually use them to cover some expenses that cannot be easily justified. For example, success fee of consulting companies that undertake the proposal submission process, for example. Finally, we are coming to we are reaching the total estimated eligible costs and the calculation of them. Here in this table, they are marked with the F sign, and actually they are representing a sum of all budget categories that are foreseen by the program, the old one that we actually go through. And still, by the end, this sum is still, it's not the maximum EU contribution. And you will see it now through the one example, how these things, how we calculate this total estimated eligible cost and other different other categories. First of all, we are starting from the personnel costs, the one that Davide already calculated. So we have personnel costs. It's marked with the A sign, A letter within the table, and they are, of course, 34,800 euros. For the direct costs, just as an example, we can take that we have, for example, travel costs of 12,000 euros. For example, we have let's say 4 project meetings, and each one is 300 euros. The travel cost for each one is 300 euros. So four are making the 12,000 euros. We don't have any equipment here, but we have other goods and services that we are going to take, so 800 euros for the open access publication and some conference fee. So in total, other direct costs are 20,000 euros. Also for this example, we have a subcontracting costs, for example, for data collection, 300 euros. Fourth, these special budget categories, for example, D and E, costs of in-kind contributions not used on the beneficiary's premises, are very rare, so we are not going to use them here. We have 0 costs for them. And to calculate the indirect costs, we just follow the formula that is written within in this table, and saying that 25% of the direct costs are actually indirect costs. So 0.25 times A plus B minus E. So which makes indirect costs 13,000 euros, 700 euros. For the total estimated eligible costs, we also following the formula that is written here in the table. So as you see, they are marked with the H sign, and A plus B plus C plus D plus F plus G. So when we sum all of this, we have 71,500 euros. Still, the thing that I mentioned, and that is very important, still this is not a maximum EU contribution, and of course, and as well as requested EU contribution, but because we always have in mind this reimbursement rate. Here, of course, this rate is 100%. And so the maximum EU contribution here is the same sum, same number, for 71,500 euros, as well as the requested EU contribution here. But of course, if you have different rate, you have the different, of course, maximum EU contribution. For the requested EU contribution, the suggestion is that you should always put the number that is actually the same as maximum EU contribution. Okay, we're done with the proposal stage, so we are coming to the project stage, which is it's totally it's directly connected to the proposal stage. And here these costs are not estimation anymore. These costs are now within the project stage. They are actual costs. So here we have a spending or implementation of the budget. So our estimated eligible costs are used to determine the maximum grant amount of the action. So the budget from the project proposal, estimated budget, it's now in Annex 2 of grant agreement. And this budget, at the time of reporting, this beneficiary should declare actual costs, so not the estimation anymore, that are different from, of course, the estimated eligible costs in the budget. There are some rules here as well. Of course, I will just read these rules for me because they are the rules, so it cannot be interpreted differently. So first of all, these actual costs must be actually incurred by the beneficiary. It's logical, be incurred during the project period. The only exception is, of course, the final report, which is submitted 16 days after the end of the project. So that's why it's exception. Third one is this cost must be included in the budget, of course, in the grant agreement, indicated in the grant agreement. Costs must be incurred in connection with the action and necessary for its implementation. Implementation, of course, according to the description of action of the grant agreement. This cost needs to be identifiable and recorded in the beneficiary's accounts in accordance with the applicable accounting standards, of course, and usual cost accounting practices. This cost needs to comply with the applicable national laws on taxes, of course, labor and social security. And finally, it must be reasonable and justified, in particular regarding the economy and the efficiency. So this cost needs to comply with the principle of sound financial management. So we have the same structure, we are following the same recipe, like we followed for the proposal period for the estimation of the budget during the proposal period. So firstly we have personnel costs. Also these costs are now only they're representing the actual hours worked by the persons directly carrying out work under the project. So that's kind of definition. And the personnel that is working for the beneficiary under an employment contract and assigned to the project, different kind of personnel could be here involved. So, for example, employees, seconded staff, SME owners, of course, and consultants. So any natural person working under a direct contract, it's actually the employee. So SME owners also are the beneficiaries and also are included into calculation here. And finally, of course, cost of personnel seconded by a third party against payment. We are taking when it comes to the calculation of the personnel costs, we are taking the gross salary of each, so including the social security and all taxes. For new personnel, you just need to keep in mind that you should apply the principles of equal opportunity and transparency, which actually means that if you want to hire somebody for the project, you need to announce it on your website, and of course to ask for CVs and follow that simple procedure that make this process transparent. So we have a formula that is pretty much the same, of course. We have a personnel costs now, not estimation. So we have hourly rate and number of actual hours worked. So for the one thing, keep in mind here that for non-profit legal entities, they could also declare the additional remuneration if it's in their standard practices. So you may check this within the conditions and limits. Once again, so we have hours worked. These hours are tracked by, they are signed in timesheets. And of course, just keep in mind that there is no overtime. Just remember the number that Davide mentioned. It's 1,720. It's a number of hours that are possible, to be work for the whole year. And there is, because the European Commission doesn't recognize the overtime job. Secondly, we have hourly rate, of course, it's euro per hour, and the formula for actual costs, and also there's some specific unit costs, but they are really some specific kind of calculation. And we may add here, of course, the additional remuneration, but only for, it's only eligible for non-profit legal entities. All of this, I will explain you all of this, of course, through one really basic example. So we have a nuclear researcher, for example, let's say working for a public research center, of course, non-profit organization, that worked for 1,720 productive hours, which is actually 1 year, one project year, 1 year in general. So remuneration components, his annual salary, for example, is 50,000 euros, and he's a head of department. So the complement for holding a management post is 1,060 euros. So our rate for this action, for EU action, is actually, so we add to his salary this complement for holding and management, and just divided by 1,720 productive hours 1 year. So we got his rate for the EU action. It's 30 euros per hour. So that's how we are actually do the calculation of it. It's pretty much same like for the budget within the proposal period. When it comes to the other direct costs, and of course ineligible costs, just to say shortly, the rules are pretty much the same. There are a few things that you should have in mind when it comes to, for example, subcontracting. You should always search for the best value for money, of course, or lowest price, and you should avoid the risk of rejection, because if this subcontracting is not presented within the grant agreement, if it's additional, if it's set out in Annex 2, it's okay. If not, in principle, you may say that they are not eligible. Travel costs should be always in line with the beneficiary's usual practices on travel and related to the project action, of course, limited to the needs of action and adequately recorded, of course. Equipment, infrastructure, and other assets, cost of renting and leasing equipment, all things that I already mentioned. They pretty much the rules are the same here also for the other goods and services, are everything. Ineligible costs, again, the list is the same for ineligible costs within the project period. Of course, these costs that do not comply with any of the conditions, so you may say are ineligible costs. At the end, of course, we have during the project time, we have a reporting period, so days worked. The obligation is actually to have the timesheet in Horizon Europe. And this, there is a rule that said that beneficiaries must, during usually 5 years, keep records and other supporting documents to prove the proper implementation of action in line with the accepted standards in the respective field. So timesheet is actually a system is very simple. It's a user-friendly model for a monthly timesheet, which meets minimum requirements. And there are some tips for timesheet. Of course, timesheet should be updated in a timely manner. Ideally, it would be every day, every working day, but of course, it's really hard to do that every day. The completed timesheet for a given month should be signed and approved in a timely manner. So during the first week of the following month, for example, the timesheet of a project manager or coordinator should be approved by her or his superior, of course. And finally, the decimal system is used to report periods other than full hours. For example, 5 hours and 30 minutes, you should report as a 5.5. This is the example of the timesheet template. It's easy, understandable, you just fill it in. You may find the template, you may find within, of course, on the funding and tenders website of the European Commission. Just type in Google, you may just type the timesheet template for Horizon Europe. You will find this link for it. And this, at the end, of course, we have a reporting within the project period. We have reporting and the necessity of keeping records. When it comes to reporting, there are some periodic reporting to European Commission. First one is related to technical, it's a technical report, and second one is actually a financial report. Both are very important. And there are also some internal financial reporting. When it comes to keeping records, of course, as I mentioned, up to 5 years after the payment, and you should keep the original documents, the contract, subcontract, invoices, boarding passes, etc. So this is the end of this part, and just shortly to introduce you with our organization, Association of Balkan Eco Innovation. If you haven't heard for us, we are a non-profit organization that helps universities and companies working on sustainable solutions to access funding, knowledge, and partnership. And our goal is we aim to support the development and the uptake of eco-innovations in the Balkan region. In regard to that, we tailored our services. Please, you may check also our website. Our services are divided into these 3 groups: get funded, get informed, and stay connected. Shortly, we are trying to make easier for you to access the funds to finance your research, your work, your business, to get informed about the latest news and stay up to date with all funding opportunities, etc. And finally, we want for you to stay connected with other regional international entrepreneurs, actors within this funding area. So that's more or less that's it. And to be our member and to use all of these services, actually we are inviting here universities, faculties, research center, companies, startups, and NGOs to become our members for a very low annual fee, so only 300 euros per year. It's a first-year offer. And through our membership, you will be in touch with the activities such as like this webinar and other webinars that are relevant for your funding. So keep in mind, this is the list for our upcoming live webinars. This one is finished, and in May we have a webinar dedicated to cascade funding opportunities, and in June we have a webinar that is dedicated to the Green Deal. Thank you, and so this is the time for question and answers. I'm inviting you, of course, you're allowed to ask anything related to the budget, of course, or us. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. In case there are no questions, I just want to add that this webinar has been recorded and that it will be available on our platform for all our members. And yes, the floor is open for questions. You can also contact us by email afterwards. And thank you. Yeah, I think, Maya, that there are no questions. Maybe we can close it here, and then if any question comes by email, we will address them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you once again, and please follow us find us on the social media, on our social medias and channels, and of course, check our website. Thank you.